I think it's fair to assume that most of you have been Catholic your whole lives. Probably your parents had you baptized when you were babies, and you grew up coming to Mass. You learned the faith at home and in the Catholic school or CCD, and when you probably lived in a familiar and comfortable Catholic atmosphere. Few of us have really had to fight for our faith. Few of us have had to worry about whether we would be arrested or sent to prison because we were Catholic. And that's a real fear that many of our brothers and sisters around the world live with every day. Now, this cradle Catholic background has many advantages, actually. For example, certain plants grow more easily in tropical environments where the conditions are good. Similarly, being raised in good social conditions where the faith can be handed on to us makes it easier for us to grow in our Catholic faith. Also, being part of the church for so long gives us a certain Catholic instinct that helps us to identify and resist temptations. But being a cradle Catholic also has its disadvantages. One of the biggest disadvantages to growing up Catholic in a peaceful society is the danger of inertia. This inertia is kind of a spiritual passivity. It happens when we find ourselves simply going through the motions of being Catholic without actively seeking to deepen our faith and become truly mature Christians, truly striving to become saints. This inertia is when we find ourselves simply keeping up appearances, maintaining traditions without appreciating why those traditions exist, and without appreciating all of the good that they do for us, whether we know it or not. In today's second reading, St. Paul gives us a two-part antidote to inertia. First, put away the old self, and then put on the new self. St. Paul tells the Christians of Ephesus, men and women who, like us, have already been baptized and instructed in the faith, who are members of the church, citizens of heaven by baptism, and recognized Mass-goers. He tells these Christians that they must put away the old self and put on the new self. In other words, the transformation that grace makes happen in our lives is never over. There's still more room to grow, and there always will be until the day that we die. We never retire from practicing the Catholic faith, from being a true Christian. We are never out of work. There's always some more old self that needs to be put away and some more new self that needs to be put on. And if we ever think that we've made it, that we're there in our faith journey, and that we're good cruising on autopilot, we can be sure that there is much more room to grow, because we won't be done running the race until we make it to heaven. God will help us do that. He will help us put away the old, and He will help us put on the new, but we have to do our part. So, we want to avoid this inertia of simply going through the motions. But how? What happens if we don't put away the old self? Simply put, if we don't put away the old self, then the spiritual life, the Mass, the Rosary, the Eucharist, it all can become boring to us. We get tired of living the faith because we have to put up walls and we have hardened our hearts to the graces God is giving us through prayer, virtuous deeds, and especially the sacraments. This spiritual apathy is called the sin of acedia. And when this happens, we turn away from our spiritual food and we start to forget that Jesus is the bread of life. Then we try perishable food instead. Why do we do this? Of course, we know that it's much easier to live for unworthy little treats than to fight for the conversion of life that comes from the cross. So we must be vigilant against these temptations. Now, Christ knows that we're vulnerable to temptation, right? As were the Ephesians in today's reading. And even if we have grown up in the church, The comforts of a consumer society and the lies of the culture of death can combine to throw us into a deadening inertia, and we can be tempted to go back to the old self. The antidote for us is the same as it was for the Ephesians: to keep our eyes fixed on the glorious life that Christ died to give us, and to decide every day to put away the deceitful desires of the old self and to put on the new self, created in God's way in righteousness and holiness of truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be at times. Now, in a few moments, Jesus, who is the bread of life, come down from heaven, will renew his commitment to us once again right here in the Eucharist. When he does that, thank him for the gift of our Catholic faith and promise him to never tarnish its brilliance.